Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, co-chair of the Workplace Suicide Prevention and Postvention Committee of the American Association of Suicidology. And it is my honor to kick our webinar off today, Mitigating Risk, Perspectives on Workplace Suicide Prevention from an Employment Lawyer, and to graciously introduce our guest, Gabor. Next slide, please. David Gabor is a partner with the Wagner Law Group. His area of specialty are litigation, labor, employment, and HR. He has won several awards for being an outstanding lawyer in the country and in New England, and we're so grateful that today he's weighing in on legal issues around workplace suicide prevention. Next slide. The Workplace Suicide Prevention National Guidelines are developed from a partnership from the American Association of Suicidology, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and United Suicide Survivors International. Next slide. If you go to www.workplacesuicideprevention.com, you will see that there are 8 guiding principles that are the undergrid for the national guidelines. And today we're going to be talking about parts of our work that really cover many of these principles, but especially dignity protection. How do we protect people's rights? Next slide. We also have 9 practices within workplace suicide prevention, and they're organized in upstream, midstream, and downstream categories. And today we're going to be talking largely about mitigating risk in workplace suicide prevention. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining for this webinar. Part of my day job is to do training on things such as harassment prevention and bullying. In fact, I recall one time where I did a live training for one of my clients. Now imagine this, picture this, I'm in a live training in a room with other people, and we're talking about bullying. And it happens to be on the very same day as a holiday called National Slap Your Annoying Coworker Day. There's actually a website called Check-A-Day, and if you look at it, every single day has all kinds of different holidays. Some you heard of, some you never heard of, and some just make you want to scratch your head. So those who are doing this program live today happens to be National Online Learning Day, which is very appropriate. So why did I tell a story about doing a training on bullying? And the reason is pretty simple. When I did that program, I had several conversations with the president of the company beforehand because I wanted to have a module on suicide prevention. And the president says, oh no, that's one of those things we don't talk about. Going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, the president relented and we had that module. About 3 months later, I get a phone call from the president and he called to thank me. It turns out that one of the employees was going through a really, really rocky time. And one of the techniques that we used in the training caused another employee to recognize the employee going through a rocky time, escalate to HR. The company intervened and they had a happy ending. It makes a difference. So, you know, I wanted to mention that to you because really, even if it's one life, we can make a difference. So the goals in the program today, and I'm going to ask you all to pick up a writing stick. Okay, what's Gabor talking about? What's a writing stick? Pen, pencil, things to write about. What we're going to do in the program today is give you some ideas and some things you can take back to your team, to your organization to help make a difference. So we're going to talk a bit about liability. You know, is an employer liable if they train, if they do not train? We're going to spend some time talking about the different laws, including the Americans with Disability Act, the Family Medical Leave Act, workers' compensation. We're going to talk a bit about state laws and local laws. And then what happens when a person does attempt suicide and we want to reintegrate that person back into the workforce? And then overriding concern employers have is risk. Please know that when I talk about risk, I'm not being insensitive to the person or the family of a person who is either has attempted suicide, where there has been a suicide or suicidal ideation. I'm talking about risk. It may sound dispassionate, but we do need to talk about it. So why are legal considerations important? Well, we've got several different statutes, and they aren't just standalone statutes. There's a lot of interplay between them. For example, the first statute that comes to mind is the Americans with Disability Act. And the ADA talks about things like if a person has got a medical condition, depression, bipolar, all those different things are covered under the ADA. And what are you supposed to do if an employee comes to you, or you know the employee suffers from a disability? Well, you're supposed to get into the interactive process and try to find a reasonable accommodation for that person. You are also responsible to have a workplace free from harassment and disparate treatment. We're going to talk about that when we get into an example in a couple of minutes. And lastly, we've got to be very careful about retaliation, which we will also cover. And then we've got the Family Medical Leave Act. And that says that an employee who's covered, working for an employer that's covered, is allowed up to 12 weeks of leave over a 12-month period. And oftentimes there's interplay between those two statutes. HIPAA comes into play quite a bit, and HIPAA talks about privacy, which becomes very important when we want to try to reintegrate a person into the workplace, and we don't want everyone to know that this person had attempted suicide. And then there's Title VII and the ADEA, and the 7 protected categories under Title VII: gender, race, religion, ethnicity, 5 categories: gender, race, religion, ethnicity, and national origin are protected, and under the ADEA, so is age. As if that's not enough to have you pull your hair out, we also have state and local laws that govern the employer-employee relationship. And there is workers' compensation. Many types of issues involving suicide, attempted suicide, are covered by workers' comp, but there are some instances that are not. So what you want to do is check with your insurance carrier and find out whether or not you do have coverage.